Compare and contrast London's and Poe's style of writing. Have you ever wondered about different writing styles? I know I have. Then let's get started. First, we need to find two authors to compare and contrast. How about we visit our old grim friend, Edgar Allan Poe? Now, let's pick another random author by spinning the wheel of writers. The lucky winner is Jack London. Okay, so now that we have our two authors to compare and contrast their writing styles of, let's get straight into this. Authors use different writing styles to convey a certain mood or effect on their audience. For example, authors who write about horror and suspense usually have a dark sense of vision, while authors of fiction and fantasy see things in a brighter light. It's all about what the author wants his audience to feel while reading. We can use Poe's Mask of the Red Death and London's White Fang for this. Right away from the title, you can see a similarity. Both have very descriptive titles. We can tell that Poe's writing will be about a bloody red death hiding amongst the crowd, concealing his identity, hence what the mask is for. London's writing will be most likely about some sort of animal with, wait for it, white fangs. Mind blown. As we read the text, we come across another similarity, figurative language. In Poe's writing, we see the use of a metaphor. Blood was its avatar. This compares blood to avatars. Right away in London's writing, it starts off with personification. Dark spruce forests frowned on either side the frozen waterway. The forest can't actually frown. Throughout the text, there are plenty more examples of figurative language that also includes symbolism, idioms, similes, and many others. Continuing on with the text, we find that in this specific example, both authors have hints of dialogue in their writing. In Poe's writing, it happens when Prince Prospero comes face to face with the Red Death himself, where he says to him, "Who dares," he demanded hoarsely of the courtiers who stood near him, "who dares insult us with this blasphemous mockery? Seize him and unmask him, that we may know whom we have to hang at sunrise from the battlements." In London's writing, it occurs when two characters, Henry and Bill, have a conversation with one another, saying, "They're after us, Bill," said the man at the front. His voice sounded hoarse and unreal, and he had spoken with apparent effort. "Meat is scarce," answered comrade. "I ain't seen a rabbit for days." A lot more dialogue could be found in both of their writings. After reading both texts, you can see a similarity in the writing style that all good writers should have: vivid description. Poe vividly describes in great detail the appearance of the Red Death, saying, "The figure was tall and gaunt, and shrouded from head to toe in the habiliments of the grave. The mask which concealed the visage was made so nearly to resemble the countenance of a stiffened corpse that the closest scrutiny must have had difficulty in detecting the cheat. And yet all this might have been endured, if not approved, by the mad revellers around." London also describes brightly the scenery of the forest, saying, "Dark spruce forests frowned on either side the frozen waterway. The trees had been stripped by a recent wind of their white covering of frost, and they seemed to lean towards each other, black and ominous, in the fading light. A vast silence reigned over the land. The land itself was a desolation, lifeless, without movement, so lone and cold that the spirit of it was not even that of sadness. It was the wild, the savage, frozen-hearted Northland wild." Their vivid description really helps the audience envision what the author envisions. As always, with similarities comes differences, like light and dark, yin and yang, etc. Let's start off with the most obvious answer. Poe's writing has a gothic feel to it. He refers to the unknown guest as the Red Death instead of just a mysterious party crasher, saying, "But the murmur had gone so far to assume the type of the Red Death. His vesture was dabbed in blood, and his broad brow, with all the features of the face, was besprinkled with a scarlet horror." However, London's writing doesn't have a gothic effect. It actually isn't tainted or biased. It's just like how an outsider will see the situation, saying, "An hour went by, and a second hour. The pale light of the short sunless day was beginning to fade, when a faint far cry arose on the still air. The front man turned his head until his eyes met the eye of the man behind, and then, across the narrow oblong box, they nodded to the other." You can see the difference in the author's take on things and how it shows through their writing. Progressing through the text, we notice a difference in tone. Poe has a dreary tone in his writing, and the text reflects that, saying, "There stood against the western wall a giant clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang. There came from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical. but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that, at each lapse of an hour, the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken the sound, and thus the waltzers perforce ceased their evolutions, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows, as if in confusion, reverie, or meditation. On the contrary, London has not a dreary tone, but a matter-of-fact tone. Everything is a fact that shows in his writing by saying, "A second cry arose, piercing the silence with needle-like shrillness." Both men located the sound. It was to the rear, somewhere in the snow expanse they had just traversed. A third, an answering cry arose, also to the rear, and to the left of the second cry. There's a huge difference in the tones of both Poe and London. As we advance through the text, we see that the two authors' observations differ. Poe tends to exaggerate his observations, like when he describes the presence of the Red Death by saying, "There are many individuals in the crowd who had found leisure to become aware of the presence of a masked figure, which had arrested the attention of no single individual before, and the rumor of this new presence having spread itself whisperingly around, there arose at length from the whole company a buzz, or murmur, expanse of disapprobation and surprise, then, finally, of terror, of horror, and of disgust." Nevertheless, London's observations are simple and straight to the point. When London describes how the dogs were all clustered together, he doesn't beat around the bush, but comes right out saying it, like when he said, "At the fall of darkness they swung the dogs into a cluster of spruce trees on the edge of the waterway and made a camp. The coffin, at the side of the fire, served for a seat and table. The wolf dogs, clustered on the far side of the fire, snarled and bickered among themselves, but evinced no inclination to stray off into the darkness." This observation is obviously a contrast. Now as we reach the end of both texts, yet another difference appears. Hashtag spoiler alert! For anyone who hasn't read the end of both texts, I'm going to reveal them. The ending of Poe's Mask of the Red Death resulted in the Red Death killing off everyone at Prince Prospera's party. The ending is quite gloomy, saying, "And now it's acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gay, and the flames of the tripod expired, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all." Still, London's White Fang's ending resulted in White Fang rising above all troubles and ending with a good life of happiness. The ending here is quite jovial, saying, "Then came the day when the last bandage and the last plaster cast were taken off. It was a gala day. All Sierra Vista were gathered around. The master rubbed his ears, and he crooned his love growl. The master's wife called him the Blessed Wolf, which name was taken up with acclaim, and all the women called him the Blessed Wolf." The difference in endings are hard to miss. It's sitting in plain sight and really distinguishes both pieces of literature. Hopefully this video helped you understand more about different writing styles and why certain authors use certain writing styles. Farewell, until next time.